The only real risk to Bitcoin is FUD.
I agree, but are there any types of risks?
Because it's the least ambitious. Because its ambition is to just sit there for 100 years. If it is, by the way, if it is properly understood as property, when people start to say we want Bitcoin to be currency, and then and you move beyond it, the risks are as you pursue the extra use cases on the base layer, and if you pursue the extra use cases on the layer 2 and the layer 3, the risks all accrue to the layer 2 and layer 3 applications, which are companies or projects, right?
Right. Yeah, I prefer Bitcoin as you prefer it. I don't think about, going and buying my coffee with Bitcoin personally. I know some people do, but that's not what I use my Bitcoin for.
So I think it's just FUD. The only real risk to Bitcoin is FUD. If you're holding Bitcoin for a decade, I don't see the risk. If you're asking me what's the risk in the next 3 weeks, well, somebody might say this or somebody might say that. Like, random media opinions are the big risk.
Are you worried about any type of government intervention, or if it, or anything like that? Or is that something that you think is worth considering, or you think it's sort of one of those things where there's nothing they can really do anyways?
Ben, the government's already intervened. The government is intervening, right? So in 2014, the government designated Bitcoin as property and not currency. Right? Probably the single most important intervention was the IRS saying it'll be taxed as property. What that meant was that every single transfer of Bitcoin was a taxable event, an accounting event. And that meant that it's not currency in the U.S.
Right.
Like, that's very clear. Yeah. For it to be currency, it has to be non-taxable on transfer. So that designation as property was supposed to be material. I think the government's been pretty clear that they're shutting down any exchange that doesn't exercise AML KYC, right? Look at the BitMEX thing, right? I mean, didn't they bring charges? So the government's going to they're going to put in place anti-money laundering rules, know your customer rules. You're going to have to pay tax on it. When you transfer more than $10,000 of it, they're going to track it. So the real questions are going to be clarity around trading derivatives, Bitcoin futures. The questions are going to be around trading tokens. Can you take an equity and turn it into a token, put it on a smart contract chain and trade it DeFi? Well, a lot of the world would like to do it. I somehow think that the SEC is not going to like the idea of you being able to trade securities derivatives without AML KYC. Like, I don't think you're allowed to trade. You can't trade with more than 50% margin right now. Like, so you can't have more than 2x leverage on regulated securities exchanges in the U.S. And there are very defined regulations about how much leverage you can take with derivatives, like interest rate swaps. Like, if you want to take a 10-year or 30-year interest rate swap, that was all driven by Dodd-Frank, I think. And the regulator that oversaw that was Gary Gensler while he was at the CFTC. And so there's a lot of regs around leverage and counterparty risk and transparency with commodities and with securities. And then there's a lot of question about what's a commodity and what's a security in the crypto ecosystem. And there's a lack of clarity there right now. And of course that changes country by country. So as regulators in Japan, in the UK, in the US start to get their hands around what constitutes a commodity, what constitutes a security, then they'll actually start to form views on jurisdiction. I think in Gary Gensler's testimony to Congress a few months ago, he actually noted that there are areas of question where it's not clear the SEC has jurisdiction to regulate certain parts of the crypto ecosystem. Well, the implication being that maybe as policymakers form opinions, will that jurisdiction go to the CFTC or the SEC? Or, if it's with the CFTC, the SEC doesn't have jurisdiction. If it's with the SEC, they do, right? And so so you've got a delay, and as they actually roll out those rules, then that will ripple into pronouncements about what centralized exchanges can do. You see the regulators are actually giving guidance to centralized exchanges, right? Their exchanges shutting down, in Japan, or closing off certain services in Japan and China and UK. I can't trade, as an American citizen, I can't trade futures, on some of these exchanges like Binance and FTX. I'm blocked from it, right? So if there's regulatory guidance coming to centralized exchanges, don't you think that it's also coming to decentralized exchanges and smart contract platforms after that? And so you got to expect, if I was looking at this, I would be studying what the regulators give, or what guidance they give to Binance and FTX, and then what can you do in the U.S. as a U.S. citizen? If you can't do it on a regulated custodian in the U.S., I would assume that you're not going to be able to do it on a decentralized exchange. There's no way that an American citizen is going to be able to trade. They're not going to be able to trade futures of Bitcoin on a DeFi platform legally. If they can't legally do it on Binance and FTX, they're not going to do it on DeFi. So if you're constructing that business is a gray market business, which might be legal for some pool of capital somewhere in the world. But if it's not legal for capital in the United States and Western Europe, then it's going to be a small segment, never a mega segment. Sure. There's a big question, all sorts of interesting questions, like, PayPal and Square allow you to buy Bitcoin, but they don't support Lightning.
Right.
Why? Ask yourself that question. And so where will that land? I think it's going to be a regulatory haze. I'm not saying that they're going to actually clarify everything. They probably won't. There'll probably be just this rippling stages of it's getting a little bit clearer. For example, you can see that institutions are getting more comfortable holding Bitcoin in the past 6 months than they were 12 months ago. But,
I want to ask you a question.
It'll just be like unpeeling the onion bit by bit.